to tell you a little bit about their organization and the programs they offer. Following the video, we will be joined by our moderator, Judith Pucci, and two speakers from the 9/11 Tribute Center. Please keep in mind that there will be an opportunity to ask questions at the end of the program. This program will run for 30 minutes. Please note where your exits are located. We ask that you turn off all electronic devices, cell phones, pagers, tablets. Absolutely no photography or recording of any kind is allowed. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Lee Ielke. I'm the president of the 9/11 Tribute Center. I'm also a board member of the 9/11 Memorial Museum. The 9/11 Tribute Center was started almost a decade ago by myself and Jennifer Adams. We brought together people who were deeply affected by 9/11 and built a community that is devoted to preserving and sharing their 9/11 experiences. We felt the need to give a voice to those people who had their voices stolen from them on 9/11. At the 9/11 Tribute Center, and here at the 9/11 Memorial, we share our stories with visitors every day. Our tour guides come from what we call the 9/11 community. They're all volunteers. They're either family members, rescue or recovery workers, survivors that came out of the towers, volunteers from all over our beautiful country, or people that lived and worked in the area and will witness the things that nobody should ever see. I'd like to invite you to take one of our tours on the 9/11 Memorial by one of our Tribute Center guides. In a few moments, you're going to hear two of our guides tell a little bit about their personal stories. By sharing our stories, we help others understand the impact of 9/11. The Tribute Center is a place of healing, support, and a testament to our strength. We hope our stories inspire you to remember 9/11 and that you strive to make tomorrow a better day.
That was very elegantly done. I always like to take a moment and just look out at all of you. It really is lovely to have you with us. I mean that sincerely. So let me officially welcome you to the 9/11 Tribute Center presentation of We Were There. My name is Judith Pucci. I'm a Tribute Center walking tour guide. As Lee just told you in the film, all of us at Tribute have been personally affected by the events of September 11th. We are an extremely diverse group. To give you some sense, just age alone, I think the youngest docent we have had was either 16 or 17 years old. Her father had been killed that morning, and the oldest is someone who just turned 90. Dina's daughter died that morning. So we are of different ages, we're of different backgrounds. The diversity is such that in the normal course of life, many of us would never have met. Now we share a powerful bond. And Tribute is our home base. It's where we find support, it's where we tell our stories about what September 11th was like from the inside. So this afternoon you're going to be hearing two of these stories. They're going to be told to you by the people who lived the events that we'll be telling you about. And they also happen to be my fellow Tribute Center walking tour guides. Next to me is Julie Roth, and over there at the end is Fred Sager. What do I know about you, Fred? What kind of secret can I reveal? I know. I like to shake it up a little bit. Well, what I can tell you about Fred is that he does something of which he is very proud, and personally I think he should be very proud. He is a volunteer firefighter on Long Island. He has also... firefighters out there. Oh, he was. Is he well today? Okay. Woman who's brother, did you say? I know his brother was a New York City firefighter. Oh, excuse me, Plainfield, New Jersey, yes. People came from all over to be helped to us, and we deeply appreciated it. Fred was here after the attacks. He arrived at the Trade Center on September 12th. And he worked here on and off until May of 2002, at which point the recovery effort had ended and all of the debris had been taken away. Julie's husband, Brian D. Sweeney. The D is actually very important. It stands for David, right? Because as remarkable as this is, there were two Brian Sweeneys who died on September 11th here at the Trade Center. So Brian E. Sweeney was a New York City firefighter. And Julie's Brian was a passenger on United Flight 175. That is the second plane, the one that went into the South Tower. Julie has since remarried, and she now lives in Massachusetts with her family. We're going to be meeting with Fred, so let me just set the scene for you. Like Fred, many New York City firefighters live on Long Island, so he knew about 20 of the men who were killed that morning. When he arrived at the Trade Center on the day after the attacks, Fred had a very clear mission. It was to find his friends still buried in the rubble, and especially one of the closest to him, who was Jonathan Ialpi. You just saw Jonathan's father, Lee, in the film. Lee is one of the co-founders of the Tribute Center, and his son Jonathan was a New York City firefighter. I'm going to let you take it from there, Fred.
Thanks. Hi. How are you? So one thing we don't have a lot of is time. So let me just jump right in. I'm a volunteer firefighter. I came September 12th. Worked for 8.5 months. I could talk to hours. I'm not allowed to do that, so I'm going to limit it to one thing, and that was what the conditions were like while we were working here. What was it like to come down here and work, right from September 12th until May? I can tell you for the first week at least, the conditions were like it is today exactly. You go outside, it was in the high 80s, very sunny, not very cloudy, a little bit of a breeze, and you would think, well, that's kind of cool. I mean, anybody wouldn't want to work in that condition, but when you were a firefighter, you were wearing real thick pants, suspenders, and a t-shirt, heavy boots, big dopey hat, pair of gloves. So working in conditions like today, dressed like that, not the most ideal situation. And the entire time you're working, you're bent over. You're working like this the whole time. Digging, helping, whatever you're doing, you're pretty much bent over the whole time. So by now, everybody in this room has seen pictures and/or video of the rescue workers and some of the civilians at the Trade Center. And the first couple of days, they were all covered in that gray ash. You've all seen that 1,000 times, I'm sure. What is that gray ash? Where did it come from? Two 110-story buildings, 1 square acre each, collapsed on top of each other. It's called the pancake collapse. Bam, 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 down to the street. 10 floors per second. So think about that. 110 floors in 10 seconds to the street. They come down like this. Everything that's in its way is getting compacted, and it has to go someplace. It can't go up. It can't go down. It has to go out. So if you've seen video of the collapses, you've seen that big, giant gray cloud. That big, giant gray cloud is mostly the building itself, mostly the concrete, sheetrock, that kind of stuff. And it's the contents of the office, all being pulverized and blown out the windows. So when we got here September 12th, we were walking in about 2 feet of that dust. You would start digging in the dust, and it would puff up. And the first thing it would attack was your eyes. Your eyes would immediately turn red and start tearing. You'd be essentially crying the whole day. Your eyes would just tear. Nothing you could do about it. People always ask, did you wear a mask? I wore a mask for about 20 minutes. If you've ever done work in your house with those dumb, $1 masks you get from Home Depot, they're useless. Put it on. I'm fat, I sweat. So I'm wearing the mask, I'm sweating, sweat runs down, the dirt gets into the sweat, it becomes these little balls of clump, rolls into the mask, and now you're chewing it. So the mask was off, and that was the end of that. So your eyes, your mouth, gets in your nose, it gets in your ears, your skin is all dried out and cracked, and that's what it was like to be digging here every day. I can tell you for the 8.5 months that I worked here, I never saw a desk, I never saw a computer terminal, I never saw a keyboard, I never saw a wooden door, I never saw a garbage can. Everything like that was completely pulverized, and the people that worked there as well. We saw things that were flexible, that would give, a lot of paper, keys, ID cards, cell phones, had a lot of cell phones, broken but intact, shoes, silverware, carpeting, stuff like that would survive the collapse. So let's fast forward to Friday. About this time of the day, we were digging for a few hours with a bunch of guys, and we're digging just next to the North Tower, and we're digging and somebody uncovers a foot. So now you're digging, and you had to think small. All those great, super cool firefighting tools that we have are useless. Everything went against the wall, and we use regular, every day, like you use in your backyard gardening tools. A little 3-prong thingy, that's what I used a lot. Just to break up the dirt, get it up, put it in a bucket, out to the street it went. So we uncovered this foot, and we'll work, and you might hit an obstacle, a piece of rebar, that's the piece of metal that reinforces concrete. So that's got to come out, you got to cut it maybe with a bolt cutter, and then you continue, and you uncover the leg, and you get, maybe now an hour's gone by, you get to the knee, the first leg like this, and then we find a second foot. So now we kind of divvy up 2 different groups. We're working. Piece of carpeting. Carpeting dropped around, but seems to be 2 legs. Well, who's got a knife on them? Nobody, that's who. So how do you get rid of this carpeting? You're going to send out, somebody got a knife, and then you learn from that point forward, okay, mental note, you need a knife. Put the knife in your pants. Cut the carpet away, and continue. Now 3 hours has gone by. Get to the top of the first leg, and it went underneath a metal beam. Second leg, we're moving, you find a 3rd foot. I think it was a foot, about here. So now we have 2 people, maybe 3. We're continuing. Big piece of metal wrapped around these other 2 legs. Sent for a torch. Well, the torch is 400 feet away and it's being used. So the guy has to hook up another hose, another torch, he brings it over, he comes and cuts this piece of metal out of the way, we roll it back. There's a 72 on the inside of this piece of metal. So our logical conclusion was we're in the North Tower, so maybe these people were in the 72nd stairwell in North Tower. This is the stairwell door. They got wrapped in that as the building came down. These poor folks are just in the stairwell. Keep working, and underneath this beam it goes. Now you've been working for 5-6 hours. It's maybe 4 or 5 in the afternoon in this sun, and from exhaustion and heat, and you had some water, but not a lot of water, and you bent over, your back is killing you, you get up, and you walk away. And that's the psychology of working here. It's nothing ever had finality to it. We didn't find anybody. And when you found something, like I don't know how that story ended. Was it 3 people? Was it 2? Did they know each other? Civilians, rescue workers? I'm never going to know the answer to that story. And then I walked 500 feet, walked out into the checkpoint onto the West Side Highway, and that's where people will wait for you. And they would start clapping, cheering USA, USA, USA. They pat you on the back, and the dust would come off of you. They'd hand you a bottle of water, a wet rag, a sandwich, take a picture with you. And 500 feet away, you were digging in essentially a graveyard. And now they're treating you like you're the New York Yankees and you'd won the World Series. And it was so contradictory to what was going on. It was just messed with you, and that's what I cried every day. That's when I started crying. The only thing I want to talk about besides that is my friend John. John was found at the base of the South Tower, December 11th, exactly 3 months later after the attacks. Base of the South Tower, fair conclusion was that John died in 1959, the time the South Tower collapsed. And what made his body being recovered was so significant, it was a whole body. No such thing as a whole body, but essentially a whole body. Only 174 whole bodies out of 2,749 people who were killed to where we are right now. Only 174. 21,000 body parts recovered. And 41% of those people have yet to be identified. So when you're in the memorial walking around, think about those families. Thank you.
The role of volunteer firefighters was really an important one after September 11th. Let me give you a sense of what that means. Not only did the majority of Long Island's volunteer fire departments help with the rescue and recovery effort, and by that I mean thousands of people participated. They also stepped in and helped protect New York City neighborhoods where the regular firefighters were working here during the 9 months of the recovery. I did not realize that until I was preparing here, that there were so many volunteer firefighters who step in. That's extraordinary. Just thank you. Now, on September 11th, Julie was all of 29 years old, and she was a high school teacher. She and her husband, Brian, had been married for 2.5 years.
I usually speak first, so I'm not usually this full of emotion when I start, so I apologize for where I get to with this story. I'm going to start with a happy time, and then we'll get into that day. In 1998, November 20th, 1998, I was living in South Jersey, and my girlfriend and I frequented a bar in Philadelphia often, and we called it the Soup Bar. And this bar was where I would call it the Wall Street guys in Philadelphia would go and hang out, and I was single, and I thought a great place to meet somebody. So we're there maybe for about a half an hour, and the door opens and it catches my eye, and this approximately 6'3", 240 pounds, very commanding force of a man walks in the door, but he doesn't have a suit on. He has on a pair of jeans, a denim button-down shirt, LL Bean hiking boots, and a baseball cap. Stuck out like a sore thumb for many reasons, but that one most of all. And I looked at him, I looked at my girlfriend immediately, and I said, that's the kind of guy I could marry. I go, I could sit in front of a fireplace with him in the Poconos for the rest of my life. That's the kind of guy I could marry. Lo and behold, I didn't know this at the time, but I found out very quickly that his friend that he was with spotted me from across the bar and said to him, I've chosen one for you, Brian. I've chosen one for you. So about 20 minutes later, the friend walked up to me, and I thought, oh, darn it. And he goes, I have someone I want you to meet. And Brian walks up, and he goes, this is Brian from Boston, and my heart dropped. I'm like, oh, that guy lives in Boston. What am I going to do with that? And so one thing led to another, and we chatted and exchanged phone numbers. I still have the phone number that he gave me that night on the back of his business card. His business card said, Top Gun instructor. And I thought, what kind of fool thinks I'm going to believe he's an instructor at Top Gun, sitting here in Philadelphia? But he was. And so 7 months later, we were married. And I packed up my belongings and moved to Massachusetts because that was just what I would have gone anywhere with them. We moved to Massachusetts, and in June of 2001, he took a job that allowed him to work out of our home. And with that, we chose a place to live that we wanted to vacation in all the time. It made sense to us, so we moved to Cape Cod, Massachusetts in June of 2001. And 3 weeks out of the month, he worked out of the house, out on the beach in his Jeep. And the other week, he had to travel. And he always flew the same flight. He always flew Monday to Friday. It was Labor Day weekend right before 9/11, and on the Sunday prior to September 11th, Sunday the 9th, Brian called up United Airlines and changed his flight from Monday to Tuesday morning. And again, at that point in time, it was great. I had an extra day with him at home, and I was on my way to teach that day at a high school. I was 4 days into a job, and I brought him to the Cape Cod airport, kissed him goodbye, like you kiss your family goodbye normally every day, your loved ones. And I said, I go, I'll see you, have a good trip. And he said, I'll see you Thursday. And he kind of smirked at me, and I said, you're coming home a day early too? And he said, yep, I'll shorten my trip as much as I could. He just wanted to be where we were that time of year. It was a beautiful time of year. He was happy. He was just where he needed to be. That morning, I was in my second class of the day, knock on my door at around 9:15, and it was the principal. My stomach dropped. I thought I was in trouble. It's just, I was, again, like I was a kid again. And he looked at me and he said, you have a telephone call. I followed him to his office. I picked up the phone, and it was my mother-in-law. And she very briefly told me that Brian was on a hijacked plane, that he had called her, and he had also called me, and that I needed to come home. And we ended the conversation. It was about a minute conversation. And we ended the conversation by her telling me not to turn on the television. And again, just a little timeline. It was 9:15. At 9:03 was when Brian's plane crashed. So she had seen this happen already. And I immediately, because of who I am, turned on the television. And I watched, what you all watched that day was United 175, the reel of film of this plane, this jumbo jet just flying into the South Tower. And I'd seen the North Tower was already hit. And my initial thought was, oh gosh, those poor people on that plane. Because that could not have been Brian's plane. Brian, from what I had learned and loved about him so much, he just wouldn't have allowed that to happen. He was an instructor at Top Gun. He flew in the Gulf War. He was a fighter pilot. He was nicknamed MacGyver by his friends and family. And MacGyver, if you don't remember, was this guy who could get out of any situation you ever put him in. And I felt bad for those people, because those people, they were non-existent anymore. And I walked out of the building that day with that knowledge and that hope, and I got home. And I knew that he called me. So I walked into the house. I looked at things sitting around in a very different light. I looked at his coffee mug. I looked at his shoes by the door. Just the last things of him. Still believing that he was somewhere alive. And I walked over to the answer machine. It was blinking number 1. And I pressed play, and it said 8:58 a.m. And this was 5 minutes before his plane crashed. And he had called his mother after me. And I hear, hey, Jules, it's Brian. I'm on an airplane that's been hijacked. If things don't go well and it's not looking good, I just want you to know I absolutely love you. I want you to do good, go have good times. The same to my family and everybody, and I just totally love you, and I'll see you when you get here. Bye, babe. I hope I call you. And hangs the phone. At that moment, I knew he was gone. I knew him well enough to know that he waited until that last second to call. He had the wherewithal about him. He was seated in row 15. He called me from row 32. He swiped a credit card. He called from the air phone. And he, in my opinion, in a so very Brian way, lined up his priorities. He knew he was going to die. He called me to say goodbye. He called me to tell me he loved me. And he called me, and as I refer to it, as he gave me my final marching orders. He told me to be good, do good, go have good times, and I'll see you when you get here. I played the message multiple times. I was alone in my house with my dogs, and I knew I had to get to his family, so I walked upstairs and I gathered some things, and this is a very blurry part in my day, but I will never forget grabbing his pillow. I wanted his pillow. I knew I wasn't going to sleep at home for a long time if this turned out the way I imagined it to. So I took his pillow and I looked at it, and something that would have kind of grossed me out and ticked me off beforehand brought on a new meaning. And he had cut his hair the night before, and all I saw all over his pillow were little pieces of hair all over his pillow. And I can't even tell you when I watched that pillow. I'd probably be embarrassed to tell you how long I slept with that pillow, but that was what I grabbed. All I grabbed, that and my dogs, and I left the house for 3 weeks. I have since, that message I shared very openly with anybody who wanted to hear it initially. It is part of the museum forever. It's part of the timeline of the day. The audio recording is down there. I invite you to go listen to it. And I do that so you feel that connection, but more importantly, so no one can imagine what they would do in a situation like that. And he was, in the midst of all that tragedy and all that horror, he was calm, he was precise, he had his priorities straight, and he allowed me, with that message, to move forward with his blessing. And I don't think I would have technically needed that. I'm glad I had it. If I answered the phone, he would have yelled at me, because I would have been screaming at him, and that would not have been a good last memory. But it was something, he gave me a gift in the face of that tragedy, and I hope that you get a chance to listen to it and understand it a little bit better when you actually hear it. I'm going to end with that and say thank you.
Because I knew that Julie was going to be here today, I listened to Brian's message. I went on the internet, and you can hear it there too. What she just told you in her story about the message, if I'm remembering correctly, that is a verbatim. It's verbatim. That is exactly what he said, yes. Which I thought was great, this idea of, he was a man that loved well. Loved well meaning that he understood that basic to love is to want the best for the other person. And that's what he gave you. 65 people 2 were the pilots, and 7 were flight attendants. You know, I just remembered, Julie, while you were talking, that the youngest person to die on September 11th was the 2-year-old child, Christine Lee Hansen. So she was on that plane with him. And her parents, yes. Yeah. Thank you both. You were just excellent. Thank you so much for doing this today. What I'd like to do now is open this up to all of you. This is your moment. If you have questions, they're here, so please. And I know that they're very much available for any questions that you'd like to ask. Yes?
I'm wondering, because you didn't wear the mask, do you have any health repercussions?
Always the first question.
Let me just repeat it to make sure everybody knows. And the question was, because he didn't wear some little silly mask, what is his health like now?
I'm pretty fortunate. I've been getting sinus infections, which I never got before September 11th. But a Z-Pack every 8 months, I can deal with that. There are people, it's every day in the paper. Never the front page, of course. You know, it's page 17. The rest of the work that was died, 9/11 illnesses. I have some close friends who are dealing with it pretty drastically. Lost a couple already. So it's every day. Every day something happens. And keep my fingers crossed that I stay the way I am. Thank you.
I have a question. Were any remains found of your husband? And also, if DNA improves and they're able to identify some of the remains, do you want to be notified?
Let me just read the question. The question is, were any of Brian's remains recovered? And if they should be recovered in the future, would Julie like to be notified?
No, Brian, nothing ever came home with Brian. It wouldn't be out of the realm. There were passengers on the airplanes that had been identified, so I did live with that fear for a long time. If he was identified, I would absolutely have to know. I would never say, don't tell me, I don't want to know. I would have to know, but I don't want it to happen, if that makes any sense. I don't want to deal with that day. I rather live in the thought that he disappeared and went to a better place. Every ounce of him went somewhere better, and that has helped me. I live in fear for the day. I would want it if it was there, but I don't want it, if that makes sense.
I know from other family members that were part of tribute, the reaction is, it varies. There were some families who received 1, 2, 3, 4 phone calls, and it just ripped that wound open every time. And in some cases, they said, please do not call again. Keep the remains with all of the others. And yet, there were other people. I know one father who said, if you call me 100 times, I want you to do that because I want every piece of my son back. So it depended on what people were prepared to deal with emotionally. Who else?
Yes.
There's a question for Julie. You said your husband was originally C15 and Roth 15, and then went down to 32. Do they know why?
Say the beginning part of the question again.
I think you said he was originally seated in row 15, and then he called you from row 32. Do they know why?
Oh, why did Brian change his location in the plane?
The reason I know it, obviously I know what seat he was assigned to sit in, and the reason I know where he called from is the passengers were invited to have a briefing with the FBI, and they basically were trying to get a timeline of what happened. I believe they have factual knowledge that what the hijackers did was they corralled the passengers into the back of the plane so that they couldn't put up the resistance for them to be in the cockpit and to fly the plane. So any calls that came from Brian's flight, I think there were 3, were all from the back of the plane, all people forced out of their seats in the back. And that came across on one of the phone calls from actually the father of that little girl, called his father and spoke with him and told him that they were forced to the back of the plane. So.
We have time for one last question.
Where in this memorial do you hear your husband's?
Where can you hear Brian's
You know that
last
answer.
words?
He's on the ground level, on the HE? It's in the historical exhibit. I've been there, I swear I've seen it and listened to it. It's just a very big museum. And it's part of the timeline of the day, and he would be at the 8:58 time slot of the day where they would have the HE.
I know that there are some other questions. I really hate cutting you off, but we do have a time limit because there is something else that will happen in the auditorium. But let me invite you all, if you have other questions, Julie and Fred will be outside that exit. So afterwards, please, they'd love to speak with any of you. Why do we tell our stories? That's the question that we're asked most often on tours. Why do you do this? It can't be easy. Every person at Tribute is going to have his or her own answer to that question. But common to us all is the hope that by telling our stories, we can show that that day, as brutal as it was about more than loss. That it was also about our resilience. And I don't mean our resilience, I mean our resilience. The resilience of the human spirit and its enduring capacity to move forward. We hope that hearing these stories here will enrich your museum experience today. And there's one last thing that I want to say before you go, and it has to do with, it actually has to do with you. I always think when I look out, at the beginning, which is when I stop and just look out at all of you, I always think that it's very easy for all of you to think that you are passive players in this. I want you to know that that is not true. You are essential to our storytelling. Because with you, we become in this together. And together we take a piece of that horrific day and we create from it something life-affirming. That is what is done here. That is what the tours do. It's about affirming life. It is a reminder of the most precious thing we have, which is our shared humanity. So on behalf of Tribute, on behalf of Julie and Fred and me, thank you. Thank you for sharing your time with us. Great.
This way?